Hello and welcome to another episode of the 10 Plus Club, where I speak to entrepreneurs who have the skill to have been running a business longer than 10 years. And I'm really keen to find out how they do it. And today I'm talking to Melanie Auld of Spice Pots, which is, well, why don't we speak to Melanie and find out what is Spice Pots? Been running it nearly 11 years now. Hello, Melanie. How are you?
Hello, lovely to be here. Yes, the spice pots, they were just a little shortcut for me to cook the Indian food that I'd learnt to cook and loved. I no longer had the time when I had my three sons in very quick succession. So I used to batch blend and make little recipes and cook like that for a long, long time. And then I eventually started it as a business. Yeah.
I might try and cut in some pictures here of
Yeah.
spice pots, just give a visual. So they are literally pots of spice that you at home can use in your Indian cuisine.
Exactly. So you can make it instead of having to buy all the different individual spices and then they're costing up your cupboard and they are going out of date, which is often what happens. We've just basically mixed them perfectly balanced because that's the other thing people get wrong or find difficult is the balance of the spices. And then we also provide extremely simple adapted recipes, which I tend to favor one pan. Um, and yeah, so we give you the recipe and the blend, and then you can create a delicious, healthy curry in 30 minutes also.
And you've based what I love about this story, Melanie, is you kind of started your own business roughly at the same time as growing a considerable sized family. I think you have three children, and you're doing this from the west coast of Scotland. Is that right?
Initially, yes, yes, and yeah.
I
Well,
have.
no, yeah, we moved actually. It was from the East Coast, so that's where the idea happened in the West Coast of Scotland when the kids were tiny, and that's where I was using it for myself. But it wasn't until we moved over to the East Coast when I actually started it as a business.
Really genuinely fascinated about how you've managed to balance entrepreneurship and family, because your business grew from effectively a cottage industry and cottage business, right? I mean, classic example of a cottage business, and you kind of just expanded, uh, quite considerably. Was that the plan?
No, I don't think there was a plan really. Well, the number one plan was that I didn't want to work for anyone else. So that was what drove my business. I did try when the kids were little to get a job, a normal job. It was a nightmare. If you've got three kids, you need to be earning an absolute fortune to pay for childcare. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to drop them off at 8 o'clock in the morning and pick them up at 8 o'clock at night, whatever it is. I just didn't want to do that. Um, I did try and get people to help look after them, but I had three sons in 3 years, so they're quite a handful. So basically, it was I knew I wanted to work for myself, absolutely 100%. And
So
yeah,
can I ask, Mena, did you know that before you had children, or was that something that was ignited once you had children?
I think I always knew that I would work for myself. I'm quite stubborn and a little bit tricky, probably to manage, I'd say. Um, I've now discovered I've got ADHD, which I think really says it all, but I didn't know that back then. So basically, yeah, I know I always I love to figure out how things work and how you can make them better. And all the jobs I had before I started my own business were all with really cool employers who let me do my own thing, which is I've only realized this looking back actually. And so but yes, no, I think it was always in me. And then with the additional complexities of trying to go back to work with three tiny children, it was really the only way for
I
me
I
anyway.
mean, it's interesting that you brought up ADHD, because the connection between neurodiversity and entrepreneurship, we're only just discovering, is huge. I mean, you look at all the entrepreneurs, they have a neurodiverse profile of some kind. And I think entrepreneurship is driven by people who don't fit generally,
Yeah.
and to have to go out and create their own business. Now, I love this story. I understand. I mean, it reminds me of Baby Boomer, the film
Oh
with
yes,
Diane.
yeah,
I don't know if you know that film,
yeah.
Diane
I do. I
Keaton.
used to love that, and that's so funny that you brought that up. Never saw the connection, but I
Have
can
you
see
only
it
just?
now. The
Can I
apple
just say, have you
sauce.
only just connected yourself to that film with
Yeah,
Diane Keaton? I
yeah.
love that.
She made apple sauce, did she?
She
Baby
made
food.
she made kids food.
Yes,
She
that's
made
it.
like organic little kids
Yeah,
pots foods, but not a million miles away from
no.
you from Melanie. But what I love is how did like what is what? There's so many questions I want to ask, but how does this business? You start off almost in the kitchen. You're blending your own spices. You does are you quickly, because the brand is lovely, by the way, and the way you've the colors of the pots are really distinctive. Are you quickly off the mark on branding, on sales? Are you like hitting the ground running, you know, or is this completely something that you stumble on as you organically grow?
Uh, it's a bit of both, but no, I definitely didn't hit the ground running. Branding is definitely where I love to be. Like I would just fiddle around with that the whole time if I could, colors and the way things look and materials and paper, and I love all the feel of it. But no, I did have a friend who had a much bigger, a huge company who does jams and jellies, and he was way ahead of me. And I asked him, I was blending my little spices in my little kitchen and making enough pots to take to a market, whatever, and then selling 50 pots and almost being a little bit reluctant to sell them because it was so much effort to make them in the first place. And they were in glass jars then, and I had my little recipe cards. But I asked him, how do I do this? How do I produce and sell? And he said, you don't. He said, if I was you, I would outsource production as quickly as you can, because otherwise, you're going to have a premises, you're going to have staff, you're going to have to safety and all that, which it didn't appeal to me at all. So it took me a long time actually to find someone that would work with me because I was so small. And the other part of it, the sales and marketing, that was just pure me just stumbling around trying to find something that worked. I had two but very early successes, which gave me confidence, I think. One of which was not on the high street in those days, was quite difficult to sell on, and it was quite a privilege to sell on it, and I think it still is actually. And they invited me to sell on there, so I got on there quite quickly. And the second thing was Olive magazine did a feature. In those days, I sold chai tea, and they did a little thing on it. So that sort of catapulted me to think, oh, because naturally not very confident person, I thought, oh, it's okay, it's somebody likes it, sort of thing. And then I just started going around shops, little shops, getting into all the local shops, and it just grew from there, really. Yeah. So, but I didn't find it easy. I didn't find it easy at all. But yeah.
And you've, I mean, how many, I mean, how much are you set? How many pots are you selling? Do you have a number like that? Or how, I mean, I know you're all over the world in various guises, various sort of outlets. What is the kind of size of your operation today?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we were very big at one point. Well, big for us, and then we've actually come down again. And that's part of the conversation of me not being able to handle us doing so well, actually. But just after, or just before, and just after lockdown, we were doing insanely well, and I couldn't quite believe it. And at that point, to give you a sort of scale of, don't know how many pots we sold, and that's a good number to figure out. But Aldi put in an order for 100,000 pots. So that was probably our biggest order that we ever did. And we did a couple of those. And so that was all over the UK. We used to supply Weight Watchers with a huge amount as well before lockdown. And we sold to Lakeland, we've sold to stores in America, Germany. But now things have really changed. And actually, one of the aspects of being a business, which I think is absolutely critical to remain in business for 11 years, is you've got to be agile and you've got to change. And if you keep clinging on to the things, even though they used to work, but they're not working anymore, you're going to die, basically. So I was very invested in wholesale. And suddenly, or not suddenly, over the last 3 years, it's completely dropped off. At one point, we were 9 distributors. Aldi, Weight Watchers, Lakeland, blah, blah, blah. And now we're with virtually none of them, and it is all online. the
So
whole, but I mean, mostly we do a few shops, but yeah, so
that
that,
seems to
yeah,
be the trend for a lot of uh, people in business, and you hear these crazy stories of like Instagram success, for example, people selling direct via Instagram and suddenly not using the traditional wholesale retail relationship and going direct, and that sounds like that's kind of what you're doing.
yeah. So and a lot of people say it's very difficult, but there's a lot of better things about it. You're in control, you're building the relationship with the customer directly. And also, so you've got them that you're building loyalty and I have a brilliant relationship with a lot of amazing loyal customers. And they see me as me. Whereas the wholesale and you get paid instantly as well. Whereas with the wholesale, I mean, there was times where people not paying us was a serious issue, and sometimes you had to wait 2, 3 months. They're pretty badly behaved, actually. A lot of the
Well, the supermarkets, without
yeah,
mentioning
and it
names.
was Aldi wasn't too bad actually, but the some of the distributors that they're the big guys and they know it and they can mess you about as much as they like. And yes, there's a lot of not very nice practices. I felt anyway, but I just felt I had to go down that route because that's what was working and whatever. But so we've had to readjust, and I've had to readjust massively, and now I'm ready to build it again, with e-commerce, being the main market. But it's not been an easy ride. No, I don't think so.
Not an easy ride. And what's remarkable is how you've balanced this with family.
Yes,
That's a real, I mean, that is a balancing act, isn't it?
it is, and it's one that I'm getting better at. I do tend to get consumed by work and then get rather irritated when it's time to make dinner or whatever it is. But I, the children are less demanding now. They're teenagers, well, they're demanding in a different way, but they don't require as much on all the time, attention. They
Constant
don't,
energy and
yeah.
vigilance.
But I was very determined. I genuinely like working, and the family aspect. The only yeah, I don't know if I've balanced it that well, to be honest, but I find it very difficult not to work. So on holidays and things, that's always been a bit of a problem. But since I had a bit of a crash about 5 years ago when I decided, right, I'm going to sort myself out. And since then, I'm definitely focused on balancing all aspects of my life. So children, work, food, exercise, friends, experiences. And that has been, really crucial to me as a person, which I think then leads your success because everything's coming from me. I am the beacon.
Isn't it? Do you think
Yeah.
there's a connection between finding balance in your life in that way,
Hmm.
and then how that balance is reflected in, say, for example, decisions to go, well, hang on a minute, why do I need to be pushed around by distributors? There might be another way. So kind of the balance in your life is kind of reflected in
Yeah.
the balance of the business.
100%, 100%. I think, the way you are is then mirrored back to you. And if you're frantically running from one thing to the other, people pleasing, then that's just going to continue to happen. So I've had to sort of take a bit of a pause after we started doing so well, and then I just basically couldn't handle it. And I just the thought of having to replicate the turnover and pay everyone, we had quite a big team at that point, and everything, I just crumbled. And I think that was a big clue for me. Well, there's something not right here, is there, if you can't cope with that? So I sort of minimized risk, minimized everything, and whilst I got myself sorted out again.
Melanie, how much of that is really about, and I speak as an entrepreneur, right? And I'm grateful that I run my business with my brother, and we are a really good fit. But my approach is always to delegate as much as possible. Isn't part of that balance letting go and trusting other people just to just get on and do the bits of the business that they can do probably better than you.
100%. And this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm learning. I like, my decision that I didn't want to be so involved in spice pots has led me on another learning path. Right, well, then you've got to stop interfering with what everyone's doing. You've got to delegate. You've got to let them do what you're paying them to do, and also trust them and empower them. So on the moment, and I'm on a mission to be a better boss and a better leader, and to empower my team, not to nitpick and meddle. So
It's
that's what
it's
I'm,
it's
yeah.
it's not uncommon, Melanie. It's the if every entrepreneur's curse is um is about letting go. And actually, the conversation we have at Businesses for Sale, that actually real value of a business is when the entrepreneur who's started it, who's given the energy to it, who's kind of birthed it and nurtured it and grown it, becomes uh, dispensable to it. That's when the business is really valuable. When the entrepreneur when you can't divorce the entrepreneur from the business cannot run without the entrepreneur. It's not a business that has any long-term value because it's not a business that can be bought easily. I mean, and that's kind of like there. That's kind of where every entrepreneur that's where every entrepreneur should be thinking. And it's interesting when I have these conversations, a lot of people say, "Oh, I haven't thought about that." Is
Yeah.
that something you have thought about?
Yes, this is I did think about it a few years ago. So I tried to separate myself via ego and forcing and pushing, and it didn't work. So now I'm on this no, now I'm very much like I want this business to be super solid foundation. I want this business to have amazing systems, everything written down, standard operating procedures. If you don't know how to do, I mean, half the time people ask me to do stuff, I'm like, well, I don't actually know. I'll just Google it. Why don't you just Google it? And then once you find out, put it in a document and stick it on the Google Drive. So basically, I'm on that mission right now. And I want to not be doing this all day, every day for the rest of my life. So I've got to change something because up until now, you wouldn't have been able to separate me from the business. But that is absolutely 100%. In the next 12 months, that is my goal, is to have the whole thing running, me dipping in KPIs for everybody, meetings that are short and productive once a week, the whole thing like really well structured. And I just dip in and out, and everyone's doing a fabulous job. That's the goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's a wonderful goal because you're the source of inspiration and creativity. So it gives you, as the entrepreneur, the space to come up with ideas of how to grow the business. You may even want to expand by acquisition, or you may want to expand by product range, or you may want to expand by territory. And that's your job. Your job is is to have the space to think outside the box. And I think this is a wonderful thing for anyone who's running a business to hear. A lot of the people watching the videos on businesses, so they're either first time buyers or they're looking to get into business. They're kind of making the transition from kind of work into business ownership. What's you've done that and you've done it really, really well, and it's inspiring. What's the advice you would give to someone who's embarking on that journey?
Funnily enough, I did a podcast thing for school kids the other day, and it was very, and it was, relevant for them. But I would say you you need to be very resilient, because mind you, you need to be resilient wherever, I suspect, actually. Um, I think you have to be quite brave, because, when you don't know how you're going to get paid, it's not, although it's all a bit of a myth because if you're working for someone, it's if I get so irritated with mortgage companies that they think that somehow my salary is less secure than if I was getting paid by somebody else. But actually, you never know what's going to happen. You never know. So I think one thing I didn't do, which I wish I'd done, is you need to have fun with it. You need to have fun because it can crush you. And so follow your instinct and your intuition and your gut, have some fun, hang out with, surround yourself by brilliant people and do what you want. Do not listen to other people. I think that's number
Do you
one.
think it's like we all at some level, we're trying to, like, we're almost blindly pursuing a concept of perceived success.
100%. And this is where I've gone off piste for so blinking long
So,
because,
but when you started it, Melanie, it was fun. When
well, yes, yeah,
in
it
the
was fun.
kitchen, when you were blending
Yes,
spices, when you were
yes,
going to the markets, it was fun. And
yes,
then you got almost sucked into this the other people's idea of what
yes,
success is that I
yes,
then have to aspire to
yes.
get my validation.
Yes, exactly that. And like even now, people say things and I'll go, well, that's a good idea. And I always assumed everyone else knew more than me, everyone. And that's part of, confidence issues, whatever. But now I'm like, that's really interesting information. I process it in my processor and I go, right, does that fit or does it not for me? And if it doesn't, and I spit it out, even if it's from a business person who's highly successful and they've been running 100 businesses for 100 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's relevant for me. And that's what I've learned, and it's gold.
And how do you locate that fun thing? Like, what is it? You know, yes, every one of us in this life can get sidetracked by pursuing this concept of success that takes us away from what is fun. But what is fun? What is fun for you as an entrepreneur? What does that mean?
Well, I think the thing that it is that you cannot control what's going to happen in a day. You might get the worst news, or you think it's the worst news. Your order's going to be late, or whatever. And I think you just have to decide that these things don't really matter. And you just have to, in that moment, even though you want to freak out, you want to blame someone, you want to shout, just recenter in the scheme of things. Does this really matter? Not really. What matters is the way I communicate with the person that's giving me the bad news, the way I'm behaving in front of my staff. I'm not really getting the sense of fun there, but it's just pausing and just going, well, this is fun. Right, how are we gonna sort this out? Rather than going, which is, it
Yes,
takes a great deal of
it's the
practice.
default mechanism
Yeah,
for a lot of
yeah.
people. It's true. Years ago, true story. We suddenly this is a businesses for sale. I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but we ended up getting like a letter from a court in France saying that you've been found guilty of plagiarism, and unless these articles from your website are removed, you're going to get, X thousand euro fine for every article. And we worked out it would be like €1 million fine. It was a legit letter from a French court. And we were like, what is going on? So we got our one French speaker in the office and we're all huddled around the phone to ring up. And he finally got through to someone. And the guy, and he's speaking fluent French. And the guy on the other end is saying, we have been communicating to you for the last 6 months about take these articles down off your French version of your site, right? And we are like, this is a scam. There are no, we have not received any communication from you. And my brother Andrew, like, we're all huddled around the phone. He's going through the desk of a former employee who's no longer there, who happened to be French. And he pulls out like a massive folder of letters. And we're like, oh my God. And we're like, so our former French employee had basically been copying from a competitor articles, content, and passing it off as their
Oh
own.
no.
And I said to, and we were like, like classic late night in the office, the hilarity of my brother just holding up this file, and all of us who were huddled around the phone, all the directors, various members of staff, like it was the kind of the drama of the day. And like late night, it's autumn, it's one of those. It's like 8 o'clock, everyone's huddled around, and put the phone down. We're like, oh my God. And I said to Andrew, we got the calculator out. How much can we be sued by? And it came to €1 million. And I said to Andrew, how much have we got in the bank? And he said, about €1 million. And I went, oh, that's all right then.
Really? Wow.
I said, if it comes to it, that's fine. But it kind of lightened the mood. But it was even as it was happening, it felt like a hilarious situation comedy. And I just think, and by the way, it was resolved in the end. We took everything down. We said sorry. We had to pay some legal fees, but that was it. And it was all dealt with. And I had to send an email to the former French employee and say, you
What?
could have said something. You
Yeah,
just could have just said, I'm in trouble here, help,
yeah.
but it just went into ostrich mode. So I think, I don't know why I told that story.
That's funny though. Yeah, is it? But it is. It's like it's disaster. It's like, well, it isn't really, or is it? You know what I mean? It's not. No one's going to die. You just got
Exactly.
to, and you just got to think.
You can't, it's almost like you can't, you have to have some distance between yourself and the business that you're running, that actually they're separate entities. And
Yeah,
if the business goes down, you don't necessarily go
yeah.
down.
Although that would, I think that would be incredibly difficult to. Yes, but
But
I see
you
what you're
know,
saying.
the point is like even within your business life cycle, you're going to have ups and downs, ups and
Yes.
downs, ups and downs. The downs feel like failures, but what they
Yeah.
really are nudges towards something better. They
Yeah.
just are.
Definitely. Yeah. That's exactly it. And it's like a message. Okay, something's not working here. You're going to need to change. You're going to need to do something different. And if you ignore the nudges, then you go down, basically.
Yeah, my view of business failure is like it doesn't like the what you accumulate in your running, like what you've accumulated, Melanie, in the 11 years of running, growing a business, coming up with a product, getting the branding right, getting it into shops, then going e-commerce route, making all those decisions, learning how to detach and delegate. I mean, very few people on the planet have that ride.
Oh, well, that's very nice for you to say. I never really think of it like that.
But
But yeah,
very few people on the planet have that ride. And
yeah,
that sense of like, it's like going out into the sea and surfing.
yeah.
Whereas, you know, if you're like a lot of people who are dissatisfied in employment are effectively on a ferry, and, and
That's
you
right.
are,
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
you are out there, surfing storms, but then enjoying the beautiful weather when it comes and going, actually, I'm going to sail to this island. And people on a ferry just can't do that. They're just
Yeah,
going,
they're on the same. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And sometimes I want to sit on a deck chair on the ferry. I'm not gonna lie, but
But it's
smoke a
true.
cigarette, drink a glass of wine.
But
But yeah,
but you're right. And you can create those ferry moments for yourself in business.
yeah,
I've done exactly that in mine.
right. Okay. Well, that's what I'm wanting to do by learning to be a better boss, to delegate, to set up all these systems. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to sit on the deck a little bit more. Yeah.
I
Instead of
love that.
bossing around. Yeah.
Melanie Auld, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about spice pots. I'm gonna probably put some images of spice pots and drop a link to your website. So if anybody
Lovely.
wants um, to get into your spice pots, there'll be a
Great.
link in the description below.
Lovely. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Melanie. Bye.
Bye bye.